And we are back right here on this Saturday with Deputy Editor for Footwear News, Sheena Butler Young. Welcome, Sheena. How are you
Thanks,
this
Carla.
Saturday?
Oh, I'm feeling good. I was saying right before we went live that I have a little bit of background noise. I don't want to introduce it, but I will because I think it's louder than I thought. My husband's producing some video today, but yeah, so we're in the same industry. Just to kind of, if I'm introducing myself, I'm married to a video producer, so it happens that he has a shoot the same time that I'm speaking to your audience, Carla. So hopefully, forgive me if it gets loud.
Can I ask, is it something he can talk about? What video he's working on?
We'll see. We'll see if we can pull him over in a little bit.
I think that's exciting. You know what? Now I'm going to get in your business. So if you don't want to answer, that's fine. But is that how the two of you kind of met, being in the industry?
We did. So we met at a journalism convention.
Nice. And that's what we're going to talk. That's incredible because, look, we're getting an extra bonus today, y'all. Look at this because, we kind of get to hit on both of those. I don't know. Maybe he might maybe he has a moment and he might want to say something. Does he do anything with the fashion piece of the videos?
So I'm going to move because his video just got really loud. I'm so sorry. I'm going to just move it.
You know what? It's okay. It's okay. This is, you know what? This is kind of fun. Look, you're moving, and I'm trying to get all the goods.
So listen, we met at a journalism convention, right? It was in Atlanta. I moved to Atlanta after I got out of grad school in 2000. I'm not going to date myself. I got out of grad school, and he and I were both attending a award ceremony for, I believe, the Association of Black Journalists. Nice. And yeah, so it was kind of funny, not to turn this into like a romance story, but we were at the same event, and he was working on stage, and I was in the audience. And he thought I was more important than I was because I was at the event, but really I was looking for a job. And he was the one with the job.
So you know what? This is good because let's talk about that.
I'm just gonna find somewhere else to be because I think this is really. I'm so sorry. I know we did a lot of prep for no reason.
No, Sheena, do not feel bad. This is the virtual world that we're living in. These are the times that we're facing. It's okay. You said some incredible things to get us going on this conversation. And I'm trying to poke. I want him to come in too.
We'll see. He's live shooting. So if he wraps up before we're done, I'm going to drag him in.
Good. So now this is the thing. I love this. You just don't even know. I get excited about this stuff. So you said some things here that are really good. One, you talked about the fact that you were a part of this, was it Association of Black Journalists?
Yes.
And then you talked about the fact you were there looking for a job. Let's go from there. How clear, really, because this is the real world. It worked clearly, and you'll share with us how that worked for you. Joining that organization, how important was that for your career as a fashion editor?
You know what? I want to be completely honest with you, with your group. For me, it was probably less beneficial than it was for my husband, right? This is a true personality thing. And I think that's why there's no one size fits all advice. Mm-hmm. So I would go in, like my husband can sell salt to a slug. He's one of those people. Like he goes into the room and he works it. And I'm a little like that, but I'm also the student that's like, type A, and I want to get an A+, and I'm very thoughtful. And sometimes I get into a room and I'm too slow to figure out where I belong and how to find my way. So every time we went to, even after we got married, we would go to National Association of Black Journalism conferences. Like we went to the one in Boston. He would always leave with a job or the connection to a job. And I would always leave with I made some really good friends. So I think it is, for me, I think it both of us, it worked out because of a couple things. He has the personality that works, and he's able to work a room, and it's good for a producer. For me, I'm a writer. I have to be very methodical about that, and I like quality connections. And I think eventually, when you get in the building, that works out for me. Like I need to apply for the job. You need to look at my writing and tell me, does this fit? For him, he's on camera right now getting, an NFL athlete to open up about Black Lives Matter. You've got to be able to, you know what I mean? So it's like a skill set thing. So I think the way that we network works for us. And I think if I were talking to someone pursuing a career, I think you have to figure out what it is. If you're being someone you're not to get in the room, it's probably not going to benefit you. And that's who he is. He's a networker. That's not me. And it was better that I didn't do it that way, that I didn't become this over the top, walk in the room and shake everybody's hands. And then I get to the job and I'm like, actually, I'm quite shy. It wouldn't have worked out,
This is phenomenal because we're getting live on the, live on the minute things. As a news editor, as him being in news, you both have to get those breaking moments. You have to stay in the vein of what's going on. And it seems like, no, that is both what you're doing. I mean, you're talking about him with an NFL person, getting him to open up about Black Lives Matter. You're on the spectrum of the business end of the fashion news. This is what it's all about. And it's awesome to see that the two different personalities can both work in that space. So I'm glad this happened. I believe all things work together for the good. No, really, because somebody out there may be saying, okay, well, what if I'm this way? What if I'm this way? So girl, you giving us some good stuff. Everybody's giving us some good stuff. But really, you're showing us both ends of the spectrum here. So this is phenomenal. I mean, thank you. So do not feel bad about it. This is good. This brings me to a point on what you said about the personality difference, because one of the things that we have going on right now on our website, the webpage blackfashioncareerday.org, or if you go into the virtual Black Fashion Career Day, Black Fashion World Organization, Give Me booth, you can access a free gifts assessment test that we have there that will help you to determine what type of personality you have, what type of leadership skills you have, and a battery of other things. This is a free test. So because you're starting here, I think this is the ideal time for somebody to find that out, because that's paramount in you deciding the career path that you want to take. Now, at the same time, you talked about the fact that you'll go to a conference and he may walk away with a ton of, you have to recap me, a ton of job offers or something like that. You were there when you met him looking for a job. When you walked away from that event, well, first of all, you were at an event looking for a job. So we have to think about that, because you're in news editing. You're moment by moment sharing things that are fresh for today. So being at an event like that looking for a job, is that a typical way you would look for a job, or are you just being creative with it?
I had to get creative. I think I had no. I was really aggressive in my search. Like I looked up. I joined the Association of Black Journalists. I connected with people. I took a longer time because I wanted to make quality connections. But this particular event was actually an award ceremony for Black movers and shakers in journalism. So people from CNN and CNBC, they were there getting these awards, and I somehow finagled my way into that room. So I don't want to shade myself and saying I'm not aggressive. I had to be very, very aggressive. It was more about when you're networking with people. I think sometimes people think you have to be a little bit, there's this idea you have to be a little bit of phony. I can't do that. Like if I don't connect with the person, I just can't do it. And it's not phony for him, but he's just better at making the connection. Like, here's what I'm looking for. Let's exchange cards. Boom. I can't do that. I have to get to know people, and I want to have an authentic relationship. But I finagled my way into this event, and they were giving away awards. And to be honest with you, I met my husband. It was an authentic connection, and he and I have both helped each other in our careers. He probably left that room with 15 business cards and emails, and he went. One of the things he got within a few months of that event was a job at ESPN. Within mere months of that event. Now my son is like clapping something. I don't know if you can hear him. So he got a job at ESPN maybe 3 months after this event. I wrote his cover letter. We have to bring him in soon, so what I did was I wrote the cover letter for him. So he's a producer. I'm a writer. I wrote the cover letter for him. When I have to do certain things, if I have to present or speak because he's a producer, I do it in front of him. And he'll tell me that's too long-winded. Cut it short. You're saying too much. Go directly to the point, because that's what he's telling probably an NFL athlete right now. Like, just say why Black Lives Matter and move on. So we helped each other in those ways. Our skills sort of, play off each other. And I'm not telling anybody just to go get married to get your career going. But I think my point is the authenticity of relationships and connections are important, and knowing what your skills are. You do have to be aggressive. I think in this industry that is so competitive, I had to get get comfortable being uncomfortable. I would say today I'm a way better networker than I was, that was a few years ago. I'm way better at it now. I'm more confident in who I am and what I've done now. I think that was a part of the challenge of me working a room. It's kind of like, those first few years out of college, or if you're switching career, where you feel a little bit like, people still have imposter syndrome, but I think the imposter is really real. Then you're like, hi, my name is Sheena. I just want a job, and here's what I can. It's uncomfortable, and I had to keep doing it. I had to get comfortable being uncomfortable, which is a part of breaking news and being an editor and asking people tough questions. And not everything I ask even fashion designers about right now is comfortable. It seems sexy to people when they think about it, but I'm asking people now about diversity. It's not just how cool is your product, how diverse is your workforce. And you can see them, they clench up, and you have to be okay with that.
That's good. So you're girl, you said so much right there. You're watching that. You have to know that body language. You're watching that body language. You breaking news. This is what we do. We're having a live breaking news today conversation. This is cool. We're getting 2 for 1. I love it. This is what it's about for you. What I'm seeing in this conversation, you talk, and like you said, you're not telling people to go get married, but I love the fact that you talk about how you present to him and he'll tell you make it short, because you got to know in news, you got to be short and to the point, and you got to know what you're saying, or somebody will take that statement and run with it. But at the same time, you talk about how you were writing for him. So I love the fact, and what I'm seeing there is the fact that, hey, you need to find somebody, a friend or whatever, to bounce off of to help build your strengths, because you each other have helped each other.
Mentorship. Yeah. And it works, and it's up and down. Like, we're in different aspects of the industry, he and I. So I don't know if you can make it, like a hierarchical thing, but definitely you learn from other people in the industry. And, he's taught me certain things. I teach him certain things. The point you made is so important about brevity and how to be succinct with stuff. As a writer, one of the feedback I always give junior writers is like, we come to this field because someone told us that we're good with words. And the thing that a lot of junior writers do when they come in, it's always like, Carla sashayed into the office on a sunny day as the wind was blowing in her hair. Like, they do all these things, and we have to teach them to kind of make it succinct and to tell people what they're here to read the story for. So I like that you made that point, because it happens to be something that a lot of junior editors have to learn. It's like the value of brevity and succinct, and to make the point in as few words as possible when possible. I just love that you said that.
Well, yeah, because I'm a work in progress. So I have to learn that too, because God knows I can talk. So talk about that, building some of those other skills that people need to have to be a fashion or news, we're specifically speaking about fashion, but a news editor, because you are that lifeline of communication to us in the industry. If somebody's not paying attention to fashion news and you want to be in the fashion business, you definitely need to be paying attention, just throwing that in there. But you are that connection to what's going on in the world. You've experienced COVID. Talk about how are you getting this breaking news yourself to cover? How are you getting these tips? Talk about that skill that you have to build to be able to get this information, to report this information.
Yeah. So I'll speak specifically to magazines and and I worked in newspaper before, but like magazines and the print, and it's digital now. Most things are digital. I think the core skill, if I'm being completely transparent with people, is an ability to write in this side of the business. That's the core skill. If you can't do that, you're probably not going to be you're probably not going to get very far. And it's a muscle that has to be exercised. But I had a professor tell me in grad school, as a journalist, good writing is table stakes. First, the article has to be good. Then we tear it up.
Wait a minute, you said a good article is tailored. It's
table stakes. You know that term they use, like it's like the basic, like basically, like that's just the entry level thing. You have to be able to write a good piece of work. And then the edit team tears it up. Then we find everything that's actually wrong with it. And I remember he said that to me, and I was a tool to the class, and I was like, I don't know everyone that's listening, but I think a lot of people go to magazines or to be the editor route, either because they love fashion or they love to write. And I think it's a very humbling process when you start out to realize that basically that's just basic. Being able to put words together and make a sentence is pretty basic, as a starting point. It's really about how to tell a story, how to be obsessed with your audience. So, I write for a lot of fashion executives. Our audience is made up of CEOs of fashion brands and retailers like Macy's or Nordstrom. That's who reads our articles. That's who comes to our events. When I write a story, I'm not just trying to put beautiful words together. I'm thinking, if the CEO of Nike is reading this, will he or she, well, it's a he right now, someday it'll be a she. How will he find value in this story? What questions can I answer? So that's the methodical thinking part of it. Then there's precision and accuracy, attention to detail, right? So hold on one second, my son. I'm sorry, my son. He designed a shoe, and he keeps handing it to me this week as part of a fashion event we attended. He would love me to show this to you guys. He painted.
Oh, I love it. Oh my God.
I don't think you guys wanted this level of improvisation, but it's
I'm loving it.
And I'm a mom, so he wanted me to show. This is my son designs a shoe. Are you happy?
I love it. Tell him thank you for sharing that, because that's what
they're
this
so
is about.
Happy you shared.
Oh.
Okay, I'm sorry. So I was saying precision and accuracy, attention to detail, an obsession with who the audience is. So there are fashion magazines that are consumer facing. When you think of like an Elle or a Vanity Fair or a Vogue, and you're thinking about who a fashion influencer, what they want to hear. So I think an awareness of who the audience is always important. If you start a blog, if your way into fashion magazine world or news editing is to blog, figure out who your audience is and make sure that whatever you do is serving them. I think that's sort of related to this idea of being methodical, being strategic. I think a lot of us are creatives. It's very tough to be that way. Like, we're very free spirit. We love beautiful things. We love, whatever it is that's very fluid. And the thing that I think got me ahead or helped me in my career was learning when to be strategic and sit down and think things through and figure out how to put it together to make what it is I want to be.
That is so good.
Oh, good. So those are the things. Yeah.
That is I usually like to start with why, but you've shared all of that why with all of that, being about that value that you were bringing to that person that you're writing about. That's important. With that said, were there any expectations of the career that differed than what they really are, and how?
I don't think so. I think if I can encourage anyone, I think it's everything I would have wanted it to be in a lot of ways. I mean, they call it work for a reason. So it's work. There are times we have busy periods, like, New York Fashion Week. I attend a lot of the shows, and I think that looks like something to people that it doesn't always feel like when you're running from show to show to show. And you're trying to, now in a digital climate, you're trying to create social content. So I'm, the one that's responsible for curating this on an Instagram stories or a live, and making sure I have a cute caption and the words are spelled correctly and all of that. And then you run back to your office and you write a whole story about this show. That's kind of a lot. It's a lot of moving parts. But it's when you are doing something this exciting and cool, I think it's hard for it to feel hard. And I think that that's what I would say to people that are thinking about it, and to even parents who have creative children that want to be a part of this industry. And it's a hard sell because the barrier of entry is quite high. It's competitive. They say in the creative industries that, the education part for us is always seen as easier And then if you're in STEM, it's tougher. And then you get out, but they have a lower barrier to entry. If you leave with an engineering degree, the job's there. You go to fashion, and maybe to some people, I don't know that I agree with this, they feel like it's an easier track. Like, oh, you're just doing creative stuff. So you get your degree and then you try to get a job, and it's a higher barrier of entry. You're competing with 100,000 other creative people that just think it's fun to do. But once you get in, I think it is, to me, everything I could expect or could have wanted. And there are, save for the tough days here and there, I would say it's been very rewarding, especially now too. Especially now because I've gotten to do things like this, where I feel like I'm not just coming to work and writing about a cool pair of shoes or breaking news. Like if Macy's does layoffs, I have to report on that. And that a lot of that happened during COVID. Layoffs, people got furloughed, stores got closed. And we were getting that news in real time and writing that up and thinking about people losing their jobs but having to get the story out. All of those things are not are not good things, but I think the good things are there and worth holding on to. And these things are one of them, especially diversity for me and giving back and feeling like I'm doing more than writing about product or retail news. I'm touching people's lives, especially people that look like you and me, if I'm being honest. That means a lot to me personally. And that's the added reward more recently.
That is phenomenal. Tell me, let me just stop and say that was one of the reasons for asking you to be a part of this, because when we were first talking and I shared it with you, your heart was like, yes, and that's what it's about. This is about giving back. This is a platform about building our people. I tell people I feel as though during COVID, a whole generation of Moseses, ooh, bad grammar, you'll fix me later. But I feel like a whole generation of Moseses have died so the Joshuas could be raised up. And that's what we're doing. We're raising those Joshuas now. We don't want there to be a gap. I'm concerned about that gap right now because who's going to get in their place? So you don't want that. So thank you for being an incredible part of the solution. So now let's talk about, and I ask people, I say, look, I do not ask you what you make because that's no one's business, but people want to know, especially career changers. Career change, I know about that. You've made this lifestyle and then you think, okay, I got to start over and go back to the bottom. So we want to talk real stuff here. Starting out and Mars, I say Mars is the limit now. I've heard people, you say the sky's the limit when we have people on the moon, have reached the moon. Well, now we've reached Mars. So Mars is the limit. Starting out, intermediate wise, what type of income range can they expect so they can plan?
Yeah, I appreciate that you want that this part of the conversation, especially as a journalist, because I think people should know that when you leave a conversation, you want tangible things. So I thank you for asking this question. I think it's important to anyone that's listening. There's a couple things I would say. So if you're going strictly journalism, it runs the gamut, right? Entry-level careers in journalism, depending on where you live, they can be pretty low-paying jobs. Let's just be honest. When I came out of undergrad and I went to Atlanta and I interviewed at CNN, I remember hearing that the starting rate, and this is in Atlanta, the South, so the living expenses are less than where we are now, where I'm at in New York, but I think was probably 20,000 or so a year. And this was several years ago. I'll just say it was 2008, and that was the recession too. So I mean that was the Great Recession or not. And so people should be mindful of that. There are big brands in news media that I think we all know this. They pay you in brand equity. They pay you to say you work at XYZ magazine. And then the next layer is where you live, right? Certain parts of the states, it's just they say, oh, because you live here, the living expenses is lower, so that's what you should make. Where I'm at now in the Northeast, it's just naturally a higher starting rate for a lot of people. But I've heard stories in other, in magazines. I'm not going to name them because I have too many current relationships. But it's still maybe you're 40,000. If you're going strictly writer journalist. Trend magazine trade magazines tend to pay more. And so I think that's what, and then, but if you're going to be Anna Wintour at Vogue, we're talking seven figures. I mean, there's only one Anna Wintour, but in the middle of all of that, I think the average journalist in the New York market that's writing and doing well can probably expect to get to approach right around six figures if you're doing well. And if if you're managing, maybe at the height, probably more than that, like 150-ish if you're starting to be like managing editors and that kind of thing in the Northeast of New York. Now, brand side, if you want to be a journalist or a communications person in fashion working for a brand, the pay is much higher. Without giving, I want to give you all the tea because I don't want you to leave and not feel like you don't have the tangibles. I've helped people get jobs, entry-level jobs at brands doing what I do, but for a brand. And that starting salary in this area is probably more like 75. And the next step up is probably six figures. And that's like basic for a lot of the comms people at brands can make a lot more money.
Okay.
And then you can leverage it. I mean, I think when you come in and you add value, I would say, though, sky is the limit. If you're good at your job, you might pay your dues for a couple years. But if you are good, without giving away what anybody I know makes or what I make, if you're good, you can certainly demand more. But when you're starting, it's one of those industries that's tough. It's not engineering, you're not a doctor or, those kinds of really well-known high-paying jobs, but the potential is there. And especially if you work for a brand or if you become a really, a thought leader in your industry on something. Like in my case, I think I've worked really hard to develop some thought leadership around diversity and inclusion because I care about it. But if you have that, sometimes that, from the financial side can be lucrative for people. You see the correspondence on CNN that like if something happens, this is our legal correspondent, this is our correspondent that can tell us about all that's happening in sport or in fashion. And those are definitely your six figure and upwards kind of things.
Yeah.
And freelancing too. Freelancing, I think people do pretty well.
You hit on something that I want to pull out as a learning element, not in a negative manner, but you mentioned brand equity. We're seeing a lot right now in the news about individuals being paid brand equity. What, for anyone, I have to go there. I'm asking this question for education, not to judge. When we talk about brand equity, we're seeing a lot right now with Andre Leon Talley and some of that brand equity. What are some of the takeaways that you think that we can learn or people should look out for when thinking about brand equity,
I would say, without addressing his situation, because I don't know all the details, I would say generally, I think there's a level of we have to work together as an industry to do away with the free labor and the internships and that people get their foot in the door. I think we need to kind of think about that. I don't have the solution. I know that there are interns that I've worked with that probably, the training that goes into, I understand the thinking of not being able to pay someone fresh out of school to do this kind of work without first giving them some training. So I think that is one element of it. Someone told me when I was out of school and looking for a job and I was considering taking something, and I was like, well, I don't know if I want to do this. I don't know if it's the right, the pay or whatever. I was willing to take any level of pay, honestly, to try to get in somewhere. And he said to me, you gotta, it's a cliche, but I don't know why it struck me. But he said, you gotta do what you have to do until you can do what you want to do. I think we have to figure out as an industry how to do right by our junior talent. And I don't know that we're going to solve that equation today. But if I'm talking to that junior talent, I would say, assess whether you can, like another professor said, get in, get smart, and get out, right? If you can go to a big name publication and spend a year there and learn and earn some chops and learn, and that line on the resume is the line that gets you the six-figure gig, it might be worthwhile. every industry has its kind of, paying of the dues that people do, unfortunately. I don't know how we correct it, as I said, but assess whether you can have or find value in spending a year and being paid in brand equity. I would use my husband again as an example of as someone who has spent time at a ton of brands, of big name brands, and there were points that I think he might have been compensated a little bit in brand equity, but it's paid off in his career. He paid his dues by doing that, and it's paid off in his career. And so you have to kind of decide it. We're just unfortunately not in an industry where you are, like medicine, where you come out, and even doctors, some doctors, depending on what industry, what part of medicine they practiced pre-COVID, they faced disruption. Like dentists lost their practices because people weren't going in to get dental work. No industry is really guaranteed. If you choose this industry for now, until we fix some of that, or figure out another way to deal with junior talent, that's kind of the way that it is. And you have to be the steward of your own career path and figure out how to set it up. Like, if I need to spend a year at ABC Pub and make 40,000, but have that be a stepping stone, if I can afford to do that, and then do it. If I'm going to be honest, sometimes people just can't. Sometimes you cannot. My parents helped me. I was very, very blessed. They helped me a ton. My mom and dad I would probably, if I was still young enough, and I'm old enough to still get a spanking, get a spanking if I did not acknowledge that they had to help me a ton in those early years financially. And some people just don't have that. And so I don't like to be dishonest and say I just did this all myself. I owe a great debt to my parents financially supporting me when the job didn't pay enough to set me up. And I know many friends of mine that have had the same situation, because journalism is not one of those industries where if you don't get that first break and if you don't have the fortitude to just kind of live on whatever it is, or the ability to, you end up pursuing something else. That's just the honest of that part of it for me.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. You said something that I want to go back to because it's so very important. When I asked you that question, you made the statement, I'm paraphrasing, somewhere along the lines, I don't know the facts of his situation. Mm-hmm. In your role, talk about that importance and how you go about verifying facts so you're giving out accurate information.
Precision and accuracy is the number one goal of journalism. It's to tell the truth. Journalists can get sued for what we call, if you're a print journalist, if you write print or digitally, for libel. And we know that, in this part of the world, in the Western world, truth is considered the absolute defense against that kind of lawsuit. Is it true? Right? It doesn't mean that someone won't try to sue you, but if they have time, they might try. But if it's true, you will most likely prevail. It depends on the kind of story. I am very, very, I'm a stickler about precision and accuracy. There's various, I think we all, the whole team I work with at Footwear News, accuracy, precision, all of Fairchild Media. I know you had Tara Donaldson, who I work with, who works as a part of Fairchild Media, which is Footwear News, Women's Wear Daily, Sourcing Journal, and Beauty Inc. We're very committed to this. We do our legal trainings and that kind of thing. But depending on the story, I think there's a few things. If you're reporting on a layoff, right, remember that people are going to be affected by this, right? So I always want to go to the company, and I used Macy's as an example, not because Macy's is firing people this week, but it was I think they did layoffs in COVID. You want to go to the company for a statement, give them a reasonable amount of time to respond to the statement. There's a lot of things that you have to know as a journalist about your rights. Like there's the Freedom of Information Act. There's certain things that is public information. I don't want to get into like a college course on, journalism tools, but there are certain places that you can use. Like we use a system called Pacer to pull legal documents if someone's suing someone. Little tips and tricks as far as accuracy. Not putting something in a quote does not protect you. If I were to sit here and say, John Doe is a rapist, in quotes, said Carla Nelson, I would still be in trouble if that is not in fact true. So I think that's one of the things that like you work with people on my team as someone that's editing a lot of stories throughout the day. is just making sure that you're not doing things like just slapping egregious allegations into quotes and thinking that saves you, because I didn't say it, Carla said it. That's
right.
one loop, like one thing to fall into. Right now we're reporting on like something like Asian hate, right? The rise in anti-Asian racism, right? Avoiding stereotypes. Like I was giving someone this example this week. We were doing a story about why the fashion community should stand up for Asians, and we were talking about it, and I think there was this goal to talk about how much value they bring to the industry and their spending power. And I said, I wouldn't put the spending power of Asians in this story, and I'll tell you why. Because the stereotype says that they have a lot of money and they have all this spending power, and we're actually stoking a stereotype. And then someone said, well, we talk about that when we say African Americans and Hispanics. I said, exactly, because the stereotype is that they don't have money. So it's like this song and dance of thinking about how you tell a story. This is like every day before a story goes live on footwearnews.com or any other site that is doing solid old school journalism. There's so many conversations and like you're going through with a fine tooth comb thinking about things before you see what you see on our website. So that's an example of, I think, precision, not just is Nike's market cap 100 billion or 101 billion. Precision is what I just described in terms of why you would put a certain piece of information in when you talk about one group and why you would take it out when you talk about another group. Being mindful of our role as gatekeepers and how we don't stoke stereotypes. We don't use stereotypes. We talk about people in plain language, and we include sources, especially if it is an allegation. If someone comes to me and says, you were at Carla's event and Carla is just not, she is XYZ, my responsibility is to go to Carla for a comment, and then if they said, Carla is like, acts like something that's not factual, that might be a little different. I can't think of, you're just so wonderful, Carl. I can't think of something ridiculous to say, but people will say things.
Thank you.
And you have to, I would give you the platform. My responsibility is to give you a platform to address it if someone brings me an allegation. So that kind of thing.
That's very good. When you talk about something like that, and if you don't want to answer this, I understand, because it wasn't a question I submitted before, but do you have to have some sort of insurance or bond to cover you in situations like that in case there is a lawsuit or something?
That probably varies from publication to publication, but yes, I think how they go about it, I think varies. In Penske Media is a large, so the Fairchild Group that I described is a part of Penske Media. Penske Media owns like Rolling Stone, Billboard magazine, Vibe now, like a lot of publications that you know of, and they have a large legal arm that like lawyers that kind of, if there's ever any issues, we do trainings. I don't know what kind of COFRs or like reserves they have to fend off. I would say, the thing with lawsuits and litigation, like some people and some companies are more litigious than others. There is no guarantee about why someone will or won't try to sue you. I know of people that had egregious things done to them but don't want to be bothered with suing. And people that will sue if you or attempt to sue if you misspell their last name. Like you can't, there's really no rhyme or reason. But I think when you do quality journalism, it's usually not the biggest. We're not thinking about that every day. We're thinking just about the ethics. Journalism is the only profession that's protected by the Constitution, so we have a lot of rights as journalists. The big issue that you will face is if you're showing reckless disregard for the truth. There are various it depends. Like if you're doing breaking news, like if you're covering an election, and this election year is probably not the example I want to use, but you're given a little bit of wiggle room, and probably not the one 4 years ago either. But you're given a lot of wiggle room in breaking news, or more wiggle room, not a lot. But if I'm getting a feed about a natural disaster happening in a state, and I'm like, oh, I think it was a 1.2 what do you call this, like a earthquake, and it was a 1.3, it's probably not going to be a problem. like there's a certain level of understanding given to breaking news. There's like our former President Trump, I think, had a lot of, issues with the media. And so I'm not covering that. So I can't speak to what a CNN journalist would have been dealing with for those 4 years, or what an MSNBC journalist might be dealing with. But for the most part, I don't lose sleep over legal issues in my stories. Even like I try to perform within reason, and I don't ever show reckless disregard for the truth, especially legal. Yeah.
That's why you don't have a problem sleeping, because when you answer, no, really, and if anybody has questions, put them in the chat. But when you answered the question the way you did, and you said because you don't know the facts, I already knew then you're a person that's using that wisdom behind the scene to make sure you're getting to the root of the information before you write about it, speak about it, or anything. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Question. Like I said, if anybody has any questions, put them in the chat. We are going to wrap up this session. This has been so good. This has been a real live breaking news interview. I am loving this. I'm telling you, I love it.
You said you wanted the real deal, Carla.
Yes, that's what we want. Next year, we want to see if y'all allow us in the room, in the newsroom, and see what happens. I would love to do that. So just throwing that out there to see if there's a possibility. Maybe we could do a video or something. I mean, granted, we have to, certain things we couldn't see, but just throwing that out there.
I will duly note it. I'll route that up to the top.
That works for me. I love it.
Thank you, Carla.
Parents, kids, career changers, for anybody who is a student who may be interested in going into this field, for anybody who's a career changer that may be going in this field and they might not have that support line, what are some of the comments, supportive comments you offer for them?
I felt in my heart that it was going to work out. And I know you are spiritual, Carla, so I can say that to you. It's just that that right? I always was reminded that, that God didn't bring me this far to leave me. So at every turn, I just had a feeling, right? Like it's this idea of like your faith might kind of get a little weight, but it's just, you just know, like I just knew it was going to come together. And I had a lot of what I called like, God winks along the way.
Oh, like I love that. Go ahead.
Yeah, like he sort of, like you get this sensation, you get this feeling that you're on the right track. And there's a lot of disappointment happened for me, but it was just never enough. That I just felt like every step I took, I felt like I wouldn't have like God wouldn't have allowed this to happen if it wasn't going to be seen through. So that is not the tangible advice that I always like to give, but I just knew that I had to keep going. And I think I would encourage people that are listening to keep going. I think for something that someone told me was like, and I use this often is, do it scared, right? Some of my biggest career accomplishments, like, getting up on stages or doing a cover story with Katy Perry, or like, I went to Miami and I did this conference, and it was me, the president of Reebok, and Tammy Roman, who's now a good friend of mine from VH1's. First, she was on The Real World, now she's in Basketball Wives, and like and the chief diversity officer of Macy's. And I remember the night before, I could not sleep. So if you remember Reebok, this was around the time that there was this rumor that Beyonce walked out of a meeting with Reebok because they weren't diverse enough. And we got him to get on stage. This was his first big moment after that. And I was supposed to ask him about it, and I did. But the night before, I could not sleep. I had convinced Tammy Roman to fly in from Houston or LA for this event. And she's like, big in her world and social media, and from VH1, she's a big star. And I could convince her to do this thing with me. Then I convinced Macy's for the chief diversity officer to be on and it's not just me. Obviously, we have an incredible team and an events team and my team at Footwear News behind it. But this was my panel. And I could not sleep the night before. I was so freaked out. When they were calling me up on stage, my legs were shaking. And we got up there, and if I do say so myself, we killed it. I think it was a phenomenal panel, not me, but them. They killed it. And I did it. I did that scared. I was so afraid. And I don't think I've ever said it out loud since then, but that was something that I think I got an award from Penske Media for that panel. That was a career achievement. Thanks, Carla. That was a career achievement for me, and I was terrified. When I interviewed for Footwear News, I tell people this story all the time. My son was like 7 or 8 months old. I was breastfeeding, and we were living in Connecticut because my husband was at ESPN. And I got the call to come into this Footwear News interview in New York. And the day of the interview, we had a snowstorm. We drove from Connecticut in the snow with my baby in the back seat, and we had to bring my dog because we were like, we might have to overnight. And we brought the dog and the baby in the back seat. My husband pulled up at the front of 475 Fifth Avenue, Penske Media, and he let me out. Literally, I had my baby, before, in order to be able to go up there for 2 hours, I had to nurse him. He was exclusively breastfed. I literally yanked him off and handed him to my husband and went upstairs and did this interview. And then they made me stay. They liked me so much. They made me stay for an hour more to do an edit test. And the whole time I'm doing this edit test, I'm thinking about my husband in the car with the baby probably screaming because he can't eat anything else. The dog, my husband's like in Times Square with a car in the snow and a dog and a baby. And, the rest is history. I got that job, but I could not have been more stressed and more afraid and more uncertain the day I interviewed for the job that I have now. Well, I had a different job, but the company that I'm at now. And so it's never been perfect, but it's always been what I was meant to do. And I think if you have that thing that tells you that this is what you need to be doing or where you need to be going, I would stick with it. I would just stick with it. Do what you have to do to stick with it, and do it afraid. Doing it is not predisposed by having to feel confident. It's just predisposed by making the choice to take the step.
Yeah, that is so good. All right, let's see. I got a couple questions and then we're going to wrap up. When you say comms for brands, does that include fashion PR?
Yes, in that will a lot of like if you are doing, I'm thinking about comms for bigger brands. You have some small startup ones that I don't know what they pay. There's also external, so if it's I'm trying to think of a brand that I don't want to like pretend like this is really happening, but like let's just say it's Sheena's fashion brand. You can be comms for Sheena's fashions, like internal. And from what I know about a lot of those jobs, they tend to pay decently if Sheena's comms is a big brand. External PR, like marketing agencies, right, that like rep certain brands. And I think those people do pretty well too, but I'm less sure, only because I have a few friends that, like ask me for recommendations or that I know that got into brands. And a lot of people on my side of the industry, and I'll be honest, we get recruited by brands a lot. So that's how I know what the pay is. When they approach, so when you start off on the journalism side, I think you're very valuable. Everyone in fashion PR wants to know how to sell a story to a journalist. If you come from being a journalist that has stories sold to you, now I go to a brand, I tell them how to get stories, into theoretically Footwear News and Women's Wear Daily. Here's what we looked for in that story. Here's why we never reported anything that you send us as a pitch. Does that make sense, Carl? Like if I'm Manolo Blahnik and I have a new shoe and I want Footwear News to write about it, the comms person for Manolo sends a release to me. I may or may not write it up. And a part of the song and dance is you figuring out how to get me interested in writing about this story or this release. Does it make sense?
Yes, it does to me.
Okay.
Let's see. Going back to the question about getting a response from someone that I believe has an allegation. The question is, what is a reasonable amount of time to await a response?
Oh, that's a good question. It depends. Like we typically do an hour for digital, right? Like if you're doing a digital news story and let's say, and it depends, like if I don't cover, like we've had people though in our industry be accused of sexual misconduct. It really, like, it depends on how damaging the accusations may be. I will use as an example, because I covered this and maybe you'll find value in this. 2 or 3 years ago, I broke a story about Adidas, and them having a diversity and inclusion challenge. The short is, some people of color approached me and said, I work at Adidas, and yes, we have Kanye and Pharrell and Beyonce and all this great stuff, but if you are a person of color at this brand, you're not treated equitably. That was the accusation. So I was approached by this, and then I was given, like, I talked to sources, I got names of people, and I had enough people tell a consistent story. I go to the brand, and they have North America campus, and they have a campus in Germany, which is their main age. So really we say Adidas here, but it's Adidas is actually how it's pronounced. The German company.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, so I go to my contact for Adidas, and I said, look, can you get on a call? I would not do this if I just had a story that said, I don't know, Carla Nelson's Black and Fashion World is laying off 3 people. I might just send you an email. Hey, I heard you were laying off 3 people. Can you confirm? This story, I said, hey, can you get on a call? And I get on the call with the person that's in charge of comms, a job that you might want if anyone's watching, for Adidas. And I explained to this person what some of the allegations are. And I said, I would love to give you the opportunity to have your voice in this story and to give me a response. I don't think I don't think it's in your best interest to have these allegations sit here without response. A lack of response might even look worse. And the process of that is like, if she or she might say back to me, can I get 2 hours? What is your deadline? I say, you tell me. I may not want to wait 3 weeks. I'm not going to wait 2 days, but I would like to give you, how long do you think you need? And then that involves, a big story that involves them reaching out to the headquarters in Germany, the president of the brand, the CEO. It's a lot of people are involved in that story. So I was on the phone back and forth with them, and I waited for overnight, and we broke the story 24 hours later.
Wow.
So that was one of my biggest stories of my career. And 3 years later, if you watch this summer, Adidas made a commitment, $140 million to the Black community. I think that our work as an organization in covering the news and really being consistent and becoming a voice for people to come to and say, a platform for people to come to and say, here's my experience, really, if I do say so myself, our coverage drove a lot of that change at that company, but it required us to give them a chance to respond. That's the answer to your question. Smaller stories, less egregious allegations, quick hits. I do like an hour or two, like, especially if you're pretty sure, like if I find like if you do like a layoffs and you have to file it with the state, if I have that document, I'm asking you to respond out of courtesy. Like, okay, you're laying off 1,000 people. I have your documents from the government, but I'd love to get a statement from your brand, as it's a sensitive thing. You want to look like you care if you let go to 1,000 people, kind of thing.
That's phenomenal. And I have to go back in what you said. I have to say thank you, because that just shows the power of the pen and the responsibility that you held that caused Adidas, I'm going to say it right now,
Adidas. Yes.
Make a change for our people. So people need to, if you're considering a career as a fashion news editor, you need to think about that responsibility, because that is the power of the pen.
I love that.
In closing, that is the power of the pen, and you're holding it very well.
Thank you, Carla. Thank you.
You are a huge, huge, huge part of the solution. And what you just said shows it right there. So thank you.
Thank you, Carla. Carla, thank you for the platform, and thank you for all that you are doing. This is such an amazing event. You should be so, so, so proud. I'm proud for you. Great, great job and excellent work. And this event is second to none. Kudos to you.
Thank you. Don't make me cry.
Make
me cry. Thank you. Oh, no, gosh. Thank you. If you are considering a career as a fashion news editor, Gina, what are the next steps that someone should take if they're considering a career as a news editor? What action should they put behind everything you've just said?
I would say that think about what your skills are, right? Your whatever, like in my case, it was writing. Some people it's, producing, or whatever the core of that is. It's kind of conceiving big ideas, or video production, whatever it is. Figure out what the skill is and what your passion is, and marry those together, and then start charting the path toward where you want to go. If the next step is an internship, if the next step is making your own blog, if the next step is sending me a LinkedIn message and asking me to look at a writing sample, start putting one foot in front of the other. And then I think that's it. And then maybe next year they'll be up here with you, Carla.
We'll see. Sheena, thank you so much for this. I want to tell everybody we'll be back at 1:45. We're going to talk about combining fashion and law. This has been phenomenal. I also want to tell everybody tonight, after we close out with the keynote, you can come in, you can click the link where it says, I think it says meet and greet or networking. We're going to meet on a platform called AirMeet. It has little digital tables where you can actually hold one-on-one conversations with people via video chat. There's a speed networking environment, so you get 3 minutes per person. And yeah, thank you, Sheena. We'll see everybody back at 1:45. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Carla.